I honestly do not even know where to start with this mess. But I need to get it out because my family is imploding and I am somehow at the center of it despite having no idea what was happening for the past 2 years. My grandfather passed away 3 weeks ago. He was 87 and had been dealing with heart problems, so it was not unexpected, but it still hit hard. Grandpa Joe was always the anchor of our family. He hosted every holiday, remembered every birthday, and made each of us feel cared for. My dad was his youngest son. I'm 28, the middle child of 3. My older brother Kyle is 32, and my younger sister Amanda is 25. On my dad's side, there are 4 cousins from my 2 uncles, ranging in age from 26 to 35. Growing up, we were all fairly close. We were not best friends, but we saw each other at gatherings, went on family vacations, and generally got along. Sure, there was rivalry, especially between Kyle and our oldest cousin Brian, who always had to one-up people, but nothing beyond normal family competition. As adults, we drifted apart. I moved to Portland for work. Kyle stayed in Ohio. Amanda went to grad school in California, and my cousins scattered around the Midwest. Grandpa was financially comfortable. He had sold his small business about 15 years ago, invested well, and owned his home and a vacation property in Michigan. We all knew there would be an inheritance someday, but nobody really discussed it. It felt morbid to think about while he was alive. After the funeral, his lawyer scheduled a reading of the will. I flew back to Ohio expecting something simple, maybe a few $1,000s or personal mementos. The day of the reading, I immediately noticed the tension. My cousins were sitting together, quiet, staring at me with hostility. Brian glared as if I personally had wronged him. Kyle and Amanda were just as confused as I was, and my dad and uncles looked uncomfortable, like they knew something was coming. The lawyer, Mr. Patterson, began. Specific items were left to my dad and uncles. The Michigan property would be sold and split between them, and then came the bulk of the estate. 2 years earlier, Grandpa had set up what he called the life challenge for all 7 of his grandchildren. It was a point system based on achievements and life goals: marriage, buying a house, having kids, career progress, volunteering, staying out of debt, and maintaining family relationships. He had assigned point values and tracked all of us. The grandchild with the most points at his death would receive the largest portion of his estate, which, after liquidation, was around $800,000. The others would get smaller amounts based on their rankings. I was stunned. I had never heard about this before. I looked at my equally confused siblings, but my cousins were glaring at me. Mr. Patterson announced the rankings. I was in first place by a wide margin. I was set to inherit about $450,000. Second place was my cousin Sarah with about $150,000, with smaller amounts going down the list. Kyle landed in the middle. Brian was dead last with about $30,000. The room erupted. Brian started yelling that it was unfair. My other cousins joined in, accusing me of cheating, of manipulating Grandpa, of secretly knowing about the challenge. I had no idea what they were talking about. My dad demanded an explanation, and that is when Sarah lost her composure. She shouted that all of them had known about the life challenge for 2 years because Grandpa had told them. He had met with them individually and given them the criteria and explained how he would track progress. But they had decided not to tell me, Kyle, or Amanda. They reasoned that we were competition, and if we did not know we were being evaluated, they would have an advantage. My stomach dropped. My own cousins had deliberately excluded me. Mr. Patterson confirmed that Grandpa had mailed information to all 7 of us. My packet never reached me. My dad remembered forwarding a large envelope to my Portland apartment 2 years ago, but I was moving at the time and had mail go missing. I never received it. Meanwhile, my cousins had been competing intensely. Brian apparently rushed into marriage for points. Mike bought a house he could barely afford. They volunteered and networked, carefully checking Grandpa's boxes. I, on the other hand, had just been living my life. I got promoted to senior project manager, volunteered at a food bank because I cared about the cause, stayed close with Grandpa through calls and visits, managed my finances and maintained friendships, and none of it was strategic. The meeting ended with shouting. Uncle Rick had to restrain Brian because he looked ready to fight me. Mr. Patterson told us he would handle the distribution and dismissed everyone. The following days were chaotic. My phone was flooded with angry messages. My cousins accused me of lying about not knowing. Brian sent a long text claiming I had stolen his inheritance. Mike's wife called me manipulative. It felt surreal. Kyle and Amanda supported me since they were excluded too. Kyle was furious at our cousins. Amanda was deeply hurt by their betrayal. My dad was livid and argued with his brothers. Uncle Rick defended Brian and insisted that if I had not known, I would have asked questions when Grandpa acted oddly. Uncle Tom was more apologetic, but still suggested I consider splitting the money more evenly. The hardest part was a letter Grandpa had written to me, which Mr. Patterson gave me separately. Back at my hotel, I opened it and cried. Grandpa wrote that he had been watching us for 2 years and quickly realized something was wrong. He noticed his other grandchildren were suddenly eager to impress him, constantly showing off. He said it felt hollow. With me, Kyle, and Amanda, our interactions were unchanged. I still asked about his health and his garden, talked about my real life, not a curated highlight reel. 6 months in, he suspected not everyone had been informed. He tested it by mentioning the life challenge in conversation. My cousins immediately asked about details and point values. When he mentioned it to me, I just joked that life already felt like a challenge. That was when he knew. He decided not to intervene, but to let the situation play out. And in his letter, he said he was disappointed in Brian, Mike, Jennifer, and Sarah, both for deceiving us and for treating the challenge like a competition instead of living meaningful lives. They were so focused on earning points that they forgot why those things mattered. With me, he said I embodied the values he cared about: kindness, authentic relationships, integrity, and living by my own standards. He wrote that making me the primary beneficiary was not only about points, though I had earned the most, but about honoring the life I was already living. He said he loved me, was proud of me, and hoped I would use the money to keep building a good life. I read that letter 20 times and it made me feel seen and loved. But it also broke my heart because of what it revealed about my cousins and the division it created. So now I'm here with cousins who hate me, uncles fighting with my dad, and a large inheritance I never expected. Part of me wants to share some with Kyle and Amanda since they were excluded too. But I also feel that would disrespect Grandpa's wishes. I do not feel like I owe my cousins anything after they deliberately sabotaged me. My dad thinks I should keep the money and let things cool down. My mom suggests making some gesture to keep the peace, though she understands why I would not want to. Kyle says I should keep everything. Amanda is conflicted because she hates conflict and wants peace. I'm supposed to sign paperwork to accept the inheritance soon, and I have no idea what the right move is. Am I wrong for keeping money my cousins think should be distributed differently? Should I feel guilty for succeeding at a challenge I did not know I was a part of? Was Grandpa wrong for setting this up, or was it a brilliant final test of character? I just know I miss him. I wish he was here to explain himself and that my family was not torn apart. What would you do in my situation? AITA for keeping the inheritance? Update 1. I wasn't expecting so many responses to my original post. Thank you to everyone who read and commented. The perspective has been helpful, especially since I have been drowning in family drama and could not think straight. I wanted to give an update because things have gotten even messier, though in some ways not how I expected. First, I met with Mr. Patterson again to clarify the legal side. Many people mentioned my cousins might try to contest the will, so I needed to know where I stood. He explained that Grandpa Joe had been very thorough. The will was drafted carefully with clear documentation of his mental competency. He had even included a no contest clause, which meant anyone who challenged it would automatically lose their inheritance, even the smaller amounts assigned to them. Mr. Patterson said a challenge would be expensive and unlikely to succeed. He believed my cousins would realize fighting was not worth it once they consulted their own lawyers. That gave me some peace of mind, so I followed my dad's advice and signed the paperwork to accept the inheritance. The money should arrive within the next few weeks once everything is processed. After signing, I called Kyle and Amanda to explain what I planned to do, and I told them I wanted to give each of them $50,000 from my share. They were surprised and said I didn't need to, but I insisted. My reasoning was that Grandpa wanted all 7 of us to participate in his challenge. Kyle and Amanda were excluded through no fault of their own, just like I had been. I happened to fit the criteria, but they never even knew they were being evaluated. Sharing some money felt like honoring Grandpa's intent while recognizing we had all been cheated of a fair chance. Kyle got choked up and said it meant a lot. Amanda cried and said it would help pay off her student loans, which had been crushing her. I also decided to donate $50,000 to causes Grandpa cared about. He supported veteran services and local food security programs. Making donations in his name felt like the right way to honor him beyond the point system. That leaves me with around $300,000 after taxes, which is still life-changing. I plan to use most of it for a house, something I had been saving for but thought was years away. The rest will go towards retirement savings and an emergency fund. Now for the family drama. 2 days ago, Uncle Tom reached out directly. He apologized for his kids' behavior and said he was ashamed. He explained that he had not known they decided to hide the challenge from me, Kyle, and Amanda. Grandpa had told him about setting it up, but he assumed everyone had been informed. When he found out, he was furious with his kids. He said Sarah had been crying for days, not because of the money, but because she realized how badly she had damaged the family relationships. Uncle Tom asked if I would be willing to talk to Sarah eventually because she wanted to apologize properly. I told him I appreciated him reaching out and that I would think about it, but honestly, I'm not ready. I'm still too angry and hurt. Uncle Rick, however, doubled down. He called my dad and ranted that I was selfish and that Grandpa had been manipulated in his old age. My dad told him Grandpa was sharp until the day he died and that Uncle Rick needed to take responsibility for raising kids who thought cheating was acceptable. They have not spoken since. My mom later told me that Uncle Rick has hired a lawyer to explore contesting the will, despite the no contest clause. Mr. Patterson said to let him waste his money. Meanwhile, Brian texted me again, and this time with a new angle. He apologized for his first reaction and said he understood why I wanted to keep the money. Then he shared a sob story about how he got married because of the challenge, and now his marriage was falling apart because his wife realized his proposal was not genuine. He claimed he was in financial trouble and asked if I would help him with $50,000 to get back on his feet. He said it would show I was the bigger person and that Grandpa would have wanted me to help family. I ignored him. People in the comments predicted this exact move, and they were right. I'm not rewarding his behavior. He's 35 years old and needs to handle his own life. The cousin dynamics have shifted in surprising ways. Sarah told the others that what they had done was wrong and that they needed to accept the consequences. Mike's wife sent me a short apology for overreacting. Mike himself has said nothing. Jennifer, the youngest cousin at 26, sent me a long email. She admitted she had gone along with hiding the challenge because she felt pressured by Brian and Mike. But she had felt guilty the whole time. She said she did not expect anything from me, but wanted me to know she regretted it and hoped we could eventually repair our relationship. Her message felt sincere and I appreciated it, though I am not ready to forgive yet. What touched me most was the response from people who knew Grandpa outside the family. I posted a tribute to him on Facebook, and many of his friends and old colleagues shared stories. Several mentioned how he always talked about wanting his grandchildren to be good people first and successful second. One of his business partners said Grandpa once told him he worried his grandkids were too focused on external achievements instead of character. Reading those comments made me see his life challenge differently. It was not really about inheritance, it was about teaching us what mattered and hoping we figured it out. I have been thinking a lot about whether his approach was fair. Part of me wishes he had just split everything evenly and avoided the mess. Another part understands that making a point mattered more to him than keeping peace. He grew up poor, built something from nothing, and always said character was the one thing no one could take from you. I think he wanted to see which of us had internalized that lesson. The sad part is that the cousins who needed the lesson most are the ones angriest now. Brian is still playing the victim. Mike is silent but resentful. Neither is asking why they approached the challenge the way they did or what it says about their values. They are only mad they did not win. I leave for Portland in a couple of days, and honestly, I'm ready to return to normal life and put some distance between myself and all this drama. I know it's not over. There may be more fallout, but at least the immediate crisis has calmed down. I feel more confident that keeping the inheritance was the right choice, and that sharing some with Kyle and Amanda was the right thing to do. Thank you again for the advice and support. It really did help me think more clearly. Update 2. Things have taken a turn I absolutely did not see coming, and I need to share this because it feels surreal. I flew back to Portland 3 days ago, thinking the worst of the drama was over. I had been home for only 6 hours when I got a call from an unknown Ohio number. Normally I ignore those, but with everything going on with the estate, I answered. The caller was Patricia Chen, Grandpa Joe's next-door neighbor of 15 years. She said she had been trying to reach me since the funeral, but had no way to contact me until she convinced Mr. Patterson's office to pass along her message. She wanted to tell me some things about Grandpa. Her tone was kind but serious, so I agreed to set up a video call with her that evening. When we connected, I met a graceful woman in her 70s. She told me she and her late husband had been very close with Grandpa after my grandmother died. They had shared weekly dinners, helped each other with projects, and stayed close after her husband passed away. She and Grandpa had looked out for each other. Then she told me something that reframed everything. About 3 years ago, Grandpa had been diagnosed with an early form of dementia. Not Alzheimer's, but related. It was progressing slowly, and he was managing it with medication and lifestyle changes. Patricia explained that he had been private about it and had not wanted his sons to treat him differently. She only knew because she had driven him to several appointments when he felt unsure about driving himself. My stomach dropped when I heard this. I immediately thought about the will and the life challenge and whether this changed everything. Patricia reassured me that it did not. Grandpa's dementia had never reached that point where it affected his judgment or planning abilities. He had some short-term memory issues, but his reasoning and values were strong until close to the end. Mr. Patterson had required multiple medical evaluations before finalizing the will, which is why he was confident it would hold up legally. But the bigger revelation was that Grandpa had talked to Patricia extensively about the life challenge. She said he began planning it after his diagnosis because he knew his time was limited. He wanted to understand who his grandchildren really were. He worried some of us were too focused on appearances and competition. The challenge was his way of revealing everyone's true character. Patricia said he was heartbroken when he realized some of the cousins had excluded others. He suspected what was happening and set up small tests to confirm it. He debated confronting everyone, but decided that letting the truth come out after his death would be more powerful than anything he could say while alive. He hoped it would serve as a wake-up call for the grandchildren who had behaved poorly. Then Patricia told me something that made me cry during the call. She said that in his last months after I phoned him, Grandpa often called her to talk about our conversations. He was happy I stayed genuine with him, asked about his garden, remembered small details, and showed real care. He had told her I reminded him of my grandmother, who valued kindness and authenticity over material success. Patricia also said he left her something for me. She held up a small wooden box and asked if I wanted her to mail it or if I would pick it up when I returned to Ohio. I told her I would be back in a few weeks for final estate matters and would collect it then. She said she would also share more stories about Grandpa when I visited. After the call, I sat quietly, trying to process everything. The dementia diagnosis explained so much about his choices. The life challenge felt less like a game and more like a man with limited time trying desperately to leave one last lesson. I called my dad the next morning and told him. He was shocked. Grandpa had never mentioned it, and Dad now felt guilty for not noticing or asking more about his health. I reminded him that Grandpa wanted privacy and did not want to be treated as incapable. Dad admitted he wished he had more honest conversations in those last years. I told Kyle and Amanda too. Kyle said it made him respect Grandpa even more, knowing he had faced something difficult while still being so thoughtful about his family. Amanda became emotional and said she wished she had visited more often. The cousin dynamics also shifted. Sarah called me yesterday, nervous but apologetic. We spoke for over an hour. She was genuinely remorseful, not just about money, but about the broken trust. She admitted Brian had been the ringleader who convinced the others to exclude me, Kyle, and Amanda because he saw us as competition. She said she had followed his lead like always, but felt sick about it. Sarah told me learning about the dementia had hit her hard. While they had been scheming, Grandpa had been struggling with something frightening. None of them had been present enough to notice or support him. She said the whole experience forced her to look at her values, and she did not like what she saw. I told her I appreciated her honesty. I also told her I was not ready to go back to how things were, but I would leave the door open to repairing our relationship eventually. She said she understood. Brian, unsurprisingly, has not had the same realization. According to Sarah, he still insists the whole situation was unfair and that Grandpa played favorites. Uncle Rick has told his kids that the dementia proved Grandpa was not thinking clearly, even though that is not accurate and is contradicted by medical documentation. Mr. Patterson confirmed that Uncle Rick briefly consulted a lawyer, but once the attorney explained the no contest clause and medical evidence of competency, he dropped the idea. At this point, I feel less angry and more sad. Sad that Grandpa was sick and went through it mostly alone. Sad that my family has so much damage to repair. Sad that something meant to teach us about character ended up causing so much pain, even if that pain might be necessary for some people to learn. I have been thinking about what I want my life to look like from here. The inheritance will change things practically, but I do not want it to change my values. Grandpa gave me this money because of the way I lived, and the worst thing I could do would be to let it corrupt me. I also keep thinking about Patricia's offer to share more stories. There is so much about Grandpa's life I do not know, especially in his later years. I want to spend time with her when I return to Ohio, and maybe with others who knew him well. So, I can understand him more deeply, even though he is gone. I don't know if this story has a happy ending. Families are complicated, and ours has been forced to face some ugly truths. Maybe that was Grandpa's point all along. Maybe he knew these truths had to come out, even if it caused conflict, so that we could have a chance to grow. I will update again after I go back to Ohio and meet Patricia. I feel like there are still pieces of this story waiting to be uncovered. Update 3. This will probably be my final update because I think I finally understand what Grandpa Joe was trying to do, and I have some peace with it. I flew back to Ohio earlier than planned last weekend. I could not stop thinking about the box Patricia had mentioned, and I needed to see my family. My mom especially wanted us to visit Grandpa's grave together. On Saturday morning, I met Patricia at her house. She was just as warm as she'd seemed on video, and her home was filled with photos and mementos. Over tea, she told me stories about Grandpa I had never heard. She said he quietly helped neighbors with bills when they were struggling, volunteered at the VA hospital every Tuesday for a decade, and learned to bake bread during the pandemic so he could deliver loaves to isolated neighbors. He lived so much of his life privately without seeking recognition. It made sense why authenticity mattered so much to him. Then Patricia gave me the wooden box. It was cherry wood, with his initials carved into the lid. Inside were several things: a handwritten letter addressed to me, a silver pocket watch that had belonged to his father, a leather notebook, and a USB drive. The letter was dated about 6 months before he died, and in it he explained why he had created the Life Challenge. After his dementia diagnosis, he became aware of mortality and legacy. He wrote that although he had worked hard to leave us financial security, money was not what mattered most. What mattered was whether his grandchildren understood how to live good lives and be good people and find meaning beyond accumulation. He admitted he had been disappointed by what the challenge revealed about some of us, but not surprised. He said that maybe he had made things too easy and had not emphasized values strongly enough when we were growing up. He hoped the inheritance situation might jolt some of us into rethinking our priorities. Then he wrote directly about me. He said that watching me during those 2 years gave him hope and peace. He said I had shown him that at least some of what he had tried to teach had taken root. The money was his way of saying thank you for who I was and for giving him comfort in his final years. He hoped I would use it in ways that made me happy, whatever that looked like, as long as the choice came from my own values. That permission to simply be myself meant everything. The pocket watch had an inscription on the back: "Time reveals everything." It felt like the perfect summary of his philosophy. The leather notebook was a journal he had kept during the challenge. He wrote short entries about each of us, noting kindness or superficiality, thoughtfulness or performance. Reading his observations was both heartwarming and painful. One entry described a family gathering where I spent time talking to Aunt Betty, who has dementia. Grandpa wrote that this was the kind of person he hoped all his grandchildren would be: kind when there was no audience and no reward. The USB drive had video messages, one for each grandchild. In mine, recorded about a year ago, Grandpa sat in his study looking frail. He told me he was proud of me and loved me, and that he hoped the inheritance would give me freedom to make choices from my values rather than finances. He apologized if the challenge had caused conflict, but said he hoped we would eventually understand what he was trying to teach. I asked Patricia if my cousins had received boxes. She said she only knew about mine, and later that day I met up with my siblings and parents and showed them the letter and notebook. We cried together. My dad said reading it made him understand his father more deeply than he ever had. My mom wished she had known about the dementia, but my dad said Grandpa had chosen privacy and we needed to respect that. That afternoon we visited his grave. It was unseasonably warm and we stood together in silence. Amanda placed flowers. Kyle spoke a few words, and it felt right to be there as a family. That evening Sarah asked to meet for coffee and I almost declined but went. She looked exhausted and admitted that she and Jennifer had also received letters. Grandpa had written honestly about his disappointment in how they had approached the challenge, expressing hope that they would learn from it. Sarah said it was devastating to read, but she had been in therapy since the funeral, trying to understand why she had gone along with Brian's plan. She said she was ashamed but wanted to change. I told her I appreciated her honesty and I'd been thinking a lot about forgiveness. Grandpa had been disappointed, but he had still left her money in a letter, which meant he had not given up on her. I said I was not ready to fully trust her yet, but I was open to rebuilding. She also told me Brian was divorcing and had been fired before Grandpa died, which explained his desperation. According to her, he was blaming everyone else while Uncle Rick continued to enable him. Jennifer wanted to apologize to me in person, but was nervous, and I said I would be open to it. Before we left, Sarah said something that stayed with me. The worst part was not losing money, it was realizing she had failed a test that mattered. But she was grateful for that clarity because now she had time to change. I flew back to Portland the next day and have spent this week processing everything. I keep thinking about the inscription on the pocket watch. Time revealed who lived with integrity and who only performed. It revealed which relationships were genuine and which were transactional. But it also revealed capacity for growth. Sarah is working on herself. Jennifer seems remorseful. And even Mike sent me a short message saying he had read his letter and was reflecting. People are not static. I've decided to keep the $300,000 I set aside for myself without guilt. Grandpa wanted me to have it. I'm putting an offer on a modest house. I will keep volunteering at the food bank, stay in touch with Patricia, and be more present for my family. The larger family situation may take years to heal, if ever. Brian and Uncle Rick seem determined to stay bitter. I cannot control that. But I can choose how I respond and who I let into my life. I'm leaving the door open for cousins who want genuine repair, but I will not chase reconciliation. Grandpa's challenge taught me that you cannot force people to be better than they want to be. I've also realized that the life challenge never really ended. It was not just a 2-year experiment. It was a framework for living, and it continues as long as we live and are making choices. Every day I have to decide whether to live with integrity, kindness, and authenticity. The inheritance was just one moment. The real challenge is to keep living by those values. In a way, we're still being evaluated, not by Grandpa anymore, but by ourselves, our loved ones, and the legacy of our choices. Some cousins are failing that evaluation right now, but they can change. I may be passing now, but I cannot coast. I have to keep showing up as the person Grandpa believed I was. I rewatched his video last night. Near the end, he said that the greatest gift he could give was the example of a meaningful life. If we learned anything from him about kindness, integrity, generosity, or staying true to ourselves, then he had succeeded as a grandfather. That was the real point of the challenge. The money was just a tool. I like to think I passed his test, but more importantly, I want to keep passing it every day. My family is fractured, but not beyond repair. I have resources I never expected, a deeper understanding of my grandfather, and a clearer roadmap for how I want to live. The most valuable inheritance is not the money, but the desire to live up to his faith in me. I miss Grandpa Joe. I wish I could call him and tell him I finally understand. I wish I could thank him for believing in me and for pushing us all to confront who we really were. But maybe the last part of the challenge is learning to carry forward the wisdom of those we lose. Time reveals everything, including whether we are capable of growth. I hope he would be proud of me. In the end, that hope is the legacy I will hold on to. Stay tuned for more stories from Our Girl Relationships.